The air inside the San Diego Superior Court felt heavy, almost suffocating. The benches creaked as spectators leaned forward, whispering among themselves, watching the strange scene play out. At the defendant's table, a young man stood as if the room wasn't big enough for him, hands tucked into his hoodie pocket, chin lifted just enough to show he wasn't scared. 18-year-old Marcus Reid had been charged with auto theft and resisting arrest. Serious accusations. Yet the real trial had little to do with the charges, it was about appearances. Judge Harold Whitman leaned lazily in his chair, fingers drumming against the polished wood of his bench. His eyes peered down over the rim of his glasses, his lips curling into a smug grin. "So, you think you're some kind of expert, kid?" His voice dripped with condescension. "This isn't debate club. If this is your first time watching one of our videos, we'd love for you to hit that subscribe button. Your support means the world to us and it helps us bring you even more powerful stories. Stick with us till the very end. And if the story moves you, drop your thoughts in the comments and share it with a friend." A ripple of laughter spread through the courtroom, the bailiff, the stenographer, even the prosecutor. To them, Marcus was just a foolish teenager about to get steamrolled. But Marcus didn't laugh. He didn't even blink. While other kids memorized video game cheat codes, Marcus memorized case law. While his friends spent weekends at the basketball courts, he spent them buried in law books, replaying trials in his mind. His mother, Angela Reid, had worked as a paralegal for 2 decades, and Marcus had grown up absorbing every detail of the stories she brought home: corrupt prosecutors, biased judges, lazy defense attorneys. By the time he was 15, he could dissect a courtroom exchange better than most first-year law students. But none of that mattered to Judge Whitman. To him, Marcus was just another punk kid wasting his time. "Let's move this along," the judge muttered, opening the case file. "I've got a tea time at 2. This time, the gallery chuckled again. But something shifted. Marcus's lips curved into the faintest smirk. He had already spotted the judge's first mistake. The room hadn't noticed yet, but they would. The prosecutor, Adam Pierce, rose from his seat with the confidence of a man who thought the trial was already over. His navy suit was flawless, his tie knotted perfectly, and his tone was smooth from years of rehearsed courtroom speeches. "Your Honor," Pierce began, his voice commanding, "the state will demonstrate, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that the defendant, Marcus Reid, was caught behind the wheel of a stolen 2021 Lexus ES, just hours after it was reported missing. Police pursued him across downtown until he attempted to flee before being apprehended. His fingerprints were discovered on the steering wheel. The evidence is overwhelming." The words fell like hammers. People in the gallery whispered, heads shaking. On the surface, it looked devastating. Judge Whitman glanced over his glasses at Marcus, then nodded at the prosecutor. "Go on." Pierce strode toward the jury box, each polished step echoing. He stopped, faced the jurors, then flicked his gaze toward Marcus. "The defense may try to convince you this was some misunderstanding, that Marcus Reid is a victim of circumstance. But let's be real," he let the words hang. "What kind of victim runs from the police?" The tension thickened. The judge leaned forward, chin resting on his palm. Marcus's eyes never wavered. Pierce shuffled his stack of papers. "Your Honor, I have here the testimony of Officer Brian Keller, who claims he saw the defendant behind the wheel before the arrest. The car was confirmed stolen. The arrest was by the book." Judge Whitman nodded, already convinced. "Seems cut and dry." To most, it did. A stolen car. A chase. An arrest. End of story. But Marcus had studied too many trials not to see the cracks. The judge tapped his gavel lightly. "Let's hear the defense." All eyes turned to Marcus's lawyer, a jittery public defender named Rachel Lynn, who hadn't spoken more than 2 sentences since the case began. She rose, cleared her throat, then Marcus placed a hand on her arm. She froze. He shook his head slightly. She sank back into her chair. Marcus finally spoke. His voice was steady. Calm. I'll be representing myself, Your Honor. The courtroom went dead silent. Judge Whitman stared at him, dumbfounded. You'll what? Marcus straightened his posture. I'll be defending myself. The gallery erupted in murmurs. The bailiff's brow lifted. Even Prosecutor Pierce's smirk faltered for a heartbeat before he forced a laugh. This ought to be entertaining, he sneered. But no one was laughing when Marcus took his first step forward. Because the trial had just changed. The weight of the courtroom shifted as Marcus stepped forward, hands still in his pockets, letting the silence stretch just a little longer. He wanted them to sit in that discomfort, to realize this wasn't going to be the open and shut case they thought it was. Finally, he broke the quiet. Your Honor, before I begin my defense, I'd like to clarify something with the prosecution. Prosecutor Pierce raised an eyebrow, crossing his arms. Go ahead. Marcus tilted his head slightly. You said Officer Brian Keller personally witnessed me inside the stolen Lexus before I was apprehended, correct? Pierce sighed, already looking impatient. That's right. And his testimony is documented in his report. Marcus gave a slow nod. Of course it is. He turned toward Judge Whitman, his voice clear. Your Honor, I move to strike that testimony from the record. The judge squinted. On what grounds? For the first time, Marcus pulled his hands from his hoodie pocket, gesturing toward the prosecutor's table. His tone was calm, precise. Because Officer Keller never saw me in that car. In fact, Your Honor, he wasn't even on duty when the chase began. The word sent a ripple through the gallery. Pierce frowned, confusion flashing across his face. What are you talking about? Marcus took another step forward. If the court permits, I'd like to request access to Officer Keller's GPS logs from that night. If his report is true, his location history will back it up. But, he let the pause hang deliberately. I suspect it won't. The murmurs grew louder. Spectators leaned forward, whispering. Judge Whitman turned his gaze on Pierce. Counselor. Any objection to verifying those records? Pierce hesitated, just for a second, but it was enough. Everyone noticed. The jury. The gallery. Even the judge. Marcus inhaled slowly. He had watched enough trials to know hesitation was the first crack in confidence. Pierce finally muttered, no objections, Your Honor. But the damage was already done. For the first time, no one in the courtroom was laughing. Pierce shuffled his papers, trying to recover. His voice was tight. Even so, the defendant's fingerprints were found on the steering wheel of the Lexus. That alone connects him to the crime. Marcus nodded once, his face unreadable. That's true. He stepped closer to the jury box, his tone calm and measured. But let's think about what that really means. Judge Whitman gestured for him to continue. Marcus locked eyes with a few jurors. Imagine you walk into a clothing store. You try on a jacket, put your hands in the pockets, maybe zip it up. Then you put it back and leave. Later, someone else shoplifts that same jacket. Would the fact that your fingerprints are on it mean you stole it? A murmur swept the jury box. Some jurors exchanged glances. Marcus pressed forward. The car in question. It was sitting outside a 7-Eleven for hours. I was inside that store with 3 friends. When we came out, I leaned on the Lexus. Out of curiosity, I even opened the door, it was already unlocked. But I didn't take it. I didn't drive it. I didn't steal anything. Just a careless moment. He let his words settle. Then, with a voice sharp as a blade, he asked, does touching something automatically make you a criminal? The room fell silent. Pierce cleared his throat, flipping pages furiously, searching for ground to stand on. But Marcus wasn't finished. Your Honor, he said, turning back to the bench. Was the forensic specialist who processed the fingerprint evidence subpoenaed to testify here today? Judge Whitman blinked, clearly caught off guard. He looked toward Pierce. The prosecutor shifted uncomfortably. No. Marcus's lips pressed together in a faint smirk. So let me get this straight. The prosecution wants to convict me on fingerprint evidence, yet they didn't think it was necessary to bring in the specialist who handled it. No cross-examination. No chance to challenge the chain of custody. No verification of accuracy. His words cut cleanly through the silence. Pierce's jaw tightened. The gallery stirred. The judge pinched the bridge of his nose, the look of a man realizing this wasn't going to be as simple as he first believed. And Marcus wasn't even close to finished. Marcus let the silence breathe for a moment, his eyes scanning the jury. When he finally spoke, his words carried a deliberate calm, like he was pacing the rhythm of the entire courtroom. Your Honor, I'd like to submit new evidence. Judge Whitman raised a skeptical brow. Evidence? From the defendant? Yes, Marcus said evenly. An official statement from the registered owner of the Lexus, Mr. David Langford. For reasons I can't quite understand, the prosecution failed to include this in their filings. Pierce visibly stiffened, his jaw clenching. He knew exactly what Marcus was about to bring up. Marcus pulled a transcript from his folder and lifted it for the court to see. His voice rang out clear as he read. I left my car running outside the gas station. Some kid must have jumped in and taken it. But it wasn't the person the police arrested. The kid I saw was white. The courtroom gasped, a ripple of shock spreading like a wave. Marcus held the paper up higher. That is from the original police report. The very same report the prosecution conveniently ignored. The arresting officer omitted this detail from his testimony. And yet the state wants this jury to believe I was the thief, when I don't even match the description of the actual suspect. Pierce scrambled forward, his voice sharp and defensive. Your Honor, this is irrelevant. The defendant was found in connection to the vehicle. That's what matters. Marcus shook his head slowly, his tone never rising but cutting sharper than any outburst could. No, I wasn't. I wasn't in that car. I wasn't even near it when the police grabbed me. I was blocks away, walking home after picking up snacks with friends. The only thing tying me to this case is sloppy police work and assumptions. The gallery buzzed louder, reporters scribbling furiously in their notebooks. Marcus turned back to the jury, his voice calm but heavy with weight. The real thief got away that night. The officers found a black kid in the area and decided that was close enough. That's what this case is about. Not evidence. Not truth. Just convenience. A dead silence fell over the courtroom. Judge Whitman shifted in his chair, suddenly uncomfortable. He cleared his throat and turned to the prosecutor. Mr. Pierce, do you have anything further? The prosecutor's face was flushed red, his hands tightening around his notes. No, Your Honor. The judge exhaled slowly, rubbing his temple. His voice was quieter now, no trace of mockery left. Then this court has no choice, he paused, glancing toward the jury. Case dismissed. For a beat, the courtroom froze. Then chaos. Gasps, whispers, the frantic scratching of pens. The bailiff tried to restore order, but the moment had already broken wide open. Marcus didn't move right away. He stood still, letting the shock ripple through the room. From the bench, Judge Whitman's gaze lingered on him. Gone was the smug grin. In its place, something else. Recognition. Maybe even regret. Marcus finally turned, heading for the door. But before he could leave, Whitman's voice called out. Mr. Reid. Marcus stopped, glancing over his shoulder. The judge hesitated, then spoke in a low voice. You should think about law school. A faint smirk tugged at Marcus's lips. He didn't need to think about it. He already knew. The heavy courthouse doors swung open, and the noise from inside spilled out onto the marble steps. Reporters swarmed instantly, cameras flashing like a storm of lightning, microphones shoved forward in a chaotic blur. Marcus. Did you know the case would be thrown out? Marcus, what's next for you? How does it feel to outsmart a seasoned prosecutor? The questions fired like bullets, but Marcus barely glanced at them. He tugged his hoodie up over his head, weaving through the crowd without slowing down. This wasn't about fame. It wasn't about proving he was the smartest person in the room. This was bigger. At the bottom of the steps, he finally spotted her, his mother, Angela Reid. Her arms were crossed, her face a careful mask, but her eyes betrayed everything, worry, relief, and pride, all tangled together. For a long moment, she just looked at him. Then she exhaled, shaking her head. "Boy, you nearly gave me a heart attack." Marcus chuckled softly, scratching the back of his neck. "Had to take a chance, Ma." Angela didn't answer right away. Instead, she pulled him into a fierce hug, holding on like she wasn't ready to let go. "You always were the stubborn one," she murmured. The cameras kept flashing, reporters shouting, but Marcus tuned it all out. The only thing that mattered was the woman who had taught him everything he knew about the law, who had shown him, through years of late-night stories and courthouse files spread across their kitchen table, how broken the system could be. Across the street, a figure stood watching. Judge Whitman. His posture wasn't smug anymore. The arrogance was gone. His expression had shifted into something quieter, something closer to reflection. He hadn't expected this trial to mean anything more than another name, another case, another routine conviction. But now he knew he'd remember Marcus Reid. Because Marcus had done something most people never could, he forced the system to look at itself. And for once, it blinked first. The courthouse buzz still echoed behind him, but Marcus barely noticed. To everyone else, it was a sensational story, the teenager who embarrassed a judge and dismantled a prosecutor's case. But to Marcus, it was more than a headline. It was proof. How many other cases had played out just like his? How many people had been convicted not because of solid evidence, but because of shortcuts, bias, and a system more concerned with closing cases than finding truth? Marcus had the knowledge to fight back. He had spent years preparing for this moment without even realizing it. But what about the ones who didn't? The kids who didn't grow up memorizing case law, who didn't know how to spot a hole in testimony, who couldn't challenge a prosecutor's narrative. Those were the ones who got swallowed by the system. And that thought stuck with him. As Angela guided him through the crowd, Marcus kept his hood pulled up, blocking out the flashes, the shouts, the chaos. He wasn't interested in becoming some kind of celebrity defendant. That wasn't the point. The point was what came next. Because this courtroom wouldn't be the last one he stood in. But the next time, he wouldn't be standing as the defendant. He'd be at the defense table. The one wearing the suit, cross-examining officers, holding prosecutors accountable. He could already see it. The law school lectures. The late nights preparing briefs. The faces of jurors as he unraveled arguments in front of them. And the people, the ones who had nobody else willing to fight for them. That's where he was headed. And he knew something else too, he wouldn't be the only one. His story, the kid who flipped the script on a judge, on a prosecutor, on the whole system, was already spreading. If even one other person heard it and thought, maybe I can fight back too, then the system had another problem coming its way. Because change didn't start with laws. It started with people. And Marcus Reid had just lit a spark. The courthouse steps grew quieter as Marcus and his mother slipped away into the city. Behind them, the press would spin their stories, the public would argue their opinions, and the officials would scramble to explain how a teenager had just outmaneuvered them in their own house of law. But Marcus wasn't thinking about any of that. He wasn't chasing fame. He wasn't celebrating a victory. He was already looking forward, to the future he now knew was waiting for him. Because in that courtroom, Marcus Reid had proven something undeniable: truth didn't care about age, status, or authority. Truth was truth, and when armed with knowledge, even the most underestimated voice could bring it crashing down on the powerful. The same boy the system tried to break would now spend his life breaking the system open, case by case, lie by lie, injustice by injustice. And maybe one day, a young defendant would look across the courtroom and see Marcus, no longer a scared teenager, but a relentless defender of justice, and realize they weren't alone. Because Marcus wasn't just fighting for himself anymore. He was fighting for every voice the system tried to silence. And in that fight, the system had finally met its match. If you believe stories like this should be told, hit that subscribe button, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and drop a comment below because your voice matters, too.